May 1945. The war in the Pacific is nearly over, and you're standing on the flight deck of the USS Enterprise. The Air Boss has just launched 30 Hellcats and Dauntless dive bombers for a final strike on Japanese positions. In 2 hours, they'll return, low on fuel, shot up and exhausted, but a lethal problem is waiting for them. The Enterprise's deck, like every carrier's in World War II, is only 872 feet long, with one way in and one way out. Recovering aircraft was a slow, dangerous ballet. Every 90 seconds, a plane slammed down, snagged an arresting wire, taxied forward, and cleared space for the next. With 30 planes in the air and 20 minutes of fuel left, the math never worked. The final few landed on fumes. One bad landing could freeze the entire cycle, while others circled above, burning away what little fuel they had left. And once all aircraft were back aboard, the carrier became a floating bomb, wings overlapping, full of fuel and ordnance from bow to stern. Preparing for another strike took over an hour of pushing, towing, and repositioning. It was called the deck cycle problem, and it strangled American air power. Admiral Mark Mitcher knew his massive carriers could hold 100 aircraft, but their straight decks allowed only one full strike per day. The Japanese suffered the same fate at Midway in 1942. When the Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were caught with decks jammed full of planes and fuel, they couldn't launch or recover. In 5 minutes, dive bombers from the Enterprise turned 3 proud carriers into fireballs. That disaster proved something devastating. The straight-deck design, unchanged since the 1920s, wasn't just inefficient, it was lethal. After Midway, both navies began tracking deck cycle efficiency, the time a carrier was useless between strikes. The numbers were grim. The Yorktown needed 93 minutes, Saratoga 108, Japan's Shokaku over 2 hours. Pilots were dying not from enemy fire, but from running out of fuel while waiting to land. Commander Wade McCluskey, who'd led the Midway attack, wrote that American carriers were built for one-punch fights, but trapped in a 15-round war. Whoever launched first won. The rest were still clearing their decks. While American admirals fought in the Pacific, British officers in the North Atlantic quietly searched for a fix. Their carriers were smaller and cramped, but in 1943, Captain Matthew Slattery of HMS Illustrious tried something radical, letting planes land while others remained parked forward. He painted a white line down the port side, creating a narrow landing lane. It worked, once, before a misaligned sea fire clipped a parked plane. But the seed was planted. Dividing the deck into independent sections could work. Then physicist Dennis Campbell took the idea further. In 1944, he proposed cutting the aft deck 5 degrees to port, an angled flight deck. Aircraft could land on the angled section while others launched from the bow. It sounded insane, but the Royal Navy tested it on HMS Triumph, painting a crude angled runway and shifting the arresting wires. Lieutenant Commander Eric Brown landed perfectly while another plane launched. 2 simultaneous operations, something no carrier had ever achieved. The war ended before the idea could evolve further, and the reports were buried, until 1951. In Maryland, U.S. Navy test pilot Commander William Jocko Boone rediscovered Campbell's work amid growing fears that jet aircraft would make carriers obsolete. Jets were heavier, faster, and needed longer decks. The straight deck couldn't handle them. But Boone saw the brilliance in the British design. 5 degrees wasn't enough. If the deck were angled 8 to 10, a pilot who missed all arresting wires, a bolter, could simply throttle up and go around safely. Boone painted the new layout on the Midway's flight deck, shifted the arresting gear, and tested it himself. Flying an F-9F Panther at 145 knots, he landed on what looked like a turning deck, and it worked flawlessly. Then another jet launched from the bow. Recovery, launch, recovery, launch. 12 landings and 12 takeoffs in just 18 minutes, operations that used to take over an hour. In one run, Boone deliberately missed the wires. Instead of crashing, he climbed away cleanly. Watching from the island, Rear Admiral Apollo Sosek knew instantly this wasn't an improvement, it was the future of carrier aviation. By 1952, the Navy began converting its Essex-class carriers. It wasn't simple. Every system, arresting gear, catapults, hydraulics, had to be redesigned. The island superstructure was moved, steam catapults installed. USS Antietam became the first operational angled deck carrier. She deployed to Korea in 1953 and within weeks proved the concept in combat. Her air boss, Commander William Sisko, logged 68 sorties in 12 hours, 74% more than her sister ship, Kearsarge. Deck availability jumped from 42% to 79%. Pilots returning from combat could land almost any time, instead of circling on empty tanks. The angled deck saved lives. Damaged aircraft could land safely, planes with live ordnance could trap immediately, and missed landings were no longer fatal. By the end of the Korean War, Antietam was flying nearly twice as many missions as any straight-deck carrier. The evidence was undeniable. The Navy ordered emergency conversions across the fleet. Captain John Cromlin reported back to Washington, "Angled decks increase striking power by 85%. Every unmodified carrier fights at half capacity." The next step was obvious: build a new class of ships around the concept itself. In 1954, the USS Forrestal launched, the first supercarrier, with a fully integrated 8-degree angled deck, 4 steam catapults, and the ability to launch and recover at once. Her air wing could fly 170 sorties per day, nearly double the best World War II carrier. In 1960 exercises, her crew performed 147 sorties in 24 hours, proving continuous flight operations were now a reality. The Soviet Union quickly understood the threat. American carriers were no longer vulnerable during launches or recoveries. They could project power endlessly. By the late 1950s, the 4 Forrestal-class ships, Forrestal, Saratoga, Ranger, and Independence, each matched the combat output of 3 World War II carriers. The angled deck had turned carriers into platforms of relentless, rolling thunder. And it didn't stop there. Every modern carrier since, Nimitz, Ford, Queen Elizabeth, Shandong, and Vikramaditya, still uses the same 8-degree geometry Boone painted on Midway in 1951. Even vertically landing jets and drone carriers benefit from it, because the innovation wasn't about technology, it was about flow. It worked for prop planes, jets, and stealth fighters alike. 70 years later, the angled deck remains unchanged. It doubled striking power, eliminated the deadliest hazard in naval aviation, and made continuous air warfare possible. Commander Boone never meant to reshape naval history. He just wanted to keep his pilots alive. But with nothing more than a paint line and a few degrees of geometry, he built the foundation for 70 decades of dominance. Stand on the deck of a modern carrier today, and you're still standing on his idea. An idea so perfect, it never needed to change.